It all started with a video that played in the background of a nearly silent room, the volume low but the message loud. Jacob Harris, a 32-year-old warehouse worker from Detroit, was sitting on his worn-out couch, a coffee-stained shirt hanging loose over his jeans. He had just come off a 10-hour shift and was too exhausted to even lift a spoonful of microwaved pasta to his mouth. The only light in the room came from the screen of his second-hand TV, where Denzel Washington's voice filled the stillness with words that would eventually shift the entire direction of Jacob's life. "Dreams without goals are just dreams," the voice said. Jacob didn't even realize he was paying attention at first, but something about the timbre, the conviction in Denzel's voice, made him sit up straighter. He looked around at his cluttered apartment, walls bare, laundry piled up, a pizza box from last week still perched on the counter. He had been floating for too long. He wasn't homeless, but he didn't feel at home either, not in the world, not in his skin. Jacob had always felt he was meant for more. He remembered winning a debate competition in high school, how he made the auditorium roar with laughter and claps when he delivered his final speech. His teacher, Mr. Reynolds, had pulled him aside that day and told him he had a gift. But life had other plans. College was too expensive. His mom passed away from cancer when he was just 19, and his dad, unable to cope, turned to alcohol and eventually disappeared into the streets. Jacob had no siblings. He dropped out of community college after a year and started working odd jobs to stay afloat. That was over a decade ago. Still, something about that video, that one line, kept replaying in his head like a broken record. "Dreams without goals are just dreams." He looked it up on his phone. The full speech. Denzel standing at a podium, speaking to a graduating class. "You hang around the barbershop long enough, sooner or later you're gonna get a haircut," he said. The metaphor made Jacob chuckle. It was blunt, but accurate. If he kept hanging around the same old patterns, what else could he expect? The next morning, Jacob got up an hour earlier than usual. Instead of rolling over and hitting snooze, he sat on the edge of his bed and replayed that same speech. Again and again. The words seeped in. He didn't exactly know what his dreams were anymore, but he knew he didn't want to live like this. He started small. Made his bed. Cleaned his apartment. Packed a healthy lunch for work. Began walking instead of taking the bus, even though it added an extra 30 minutes to his commute. He used the time to listen to motivational speeches. Not just Denzel, but Les Brown, Eric Thomas, Inky Johnson, and others who had risen from humble beginnings to unimaginable heights. Every day, he watched those videos, often the same ones, because he needed to remind himself that greatness wasn't born in grand moments, but in consistency. One morning, while on his walk, he passed by the old community center where he used to go after school. It was now a local rec hall for teens. He peeked inside and saw a group of kids playing basketball, the echo of the bouncing ball stirring old memories. One of the staffers, a middle-aged woman named Michelle, saw him and waved. "You used to come here, right? Back when Coach Darryl ran the place." Jacob nodded. "Yeah, I was around a lot." Michelle smiled warmly. "We're short on volunteers, especially for mentoring. Ever think about helping out?" He hesitated. He wasn't sure he was qualified to mentor anyone. His own life still felt like a mess. But something inside him said yes. That decision turned out to be another turning point. Working with those teens reminded Jacob of what he loved most, connecting with people, inspiring them, helping them believe in themselves. He started organizing public speaking workshops on Saturdays. At first, only a few kids showed up. But word spread. His stories were raw and real. He didn't pretend to be a polished expert. He spoke about struggle, disappointment, and the decision to change. The kids responded. Their attendance grew week by week. Soon, Michelle encouraged him to speak at a local education summit. It was just a 15-minute slot, but Jacob prepared for it like it was a TED Talk. He rehearsed in front of the mirror, recorded himself, rewrote the speech 5 times. When the day came, he walked onto the stage, sweaty palms and all, and poured out his truth. The crowd rose to their feet. One of the attendees was Monica Jennings, a regional coordinator for a nonprofit that focused on at-risk youth development. She was so moved by Jacob's talk that she invited him to speak at more events and eventually offered him a part-time role leading motivational sessions in high schools around the city. Jacob couldn't believe it. This was happening for real. He kept his warehouse job for a while, but by the following year, he had transitioned fully into public speaking and mentoring. He created a YouTube channel called Speak Life with Jake, where he uploaded weekly motivational videos, many of them centered around themes he had absorbed from that very first Denzel Washington speech. His following grew. 10 subscribers turned into 100, then 1,000. Emails poured in from people thanking him, telling him his videos had helped them through depression, divorce, unemployment, or just plain hopelessness. One night, as he sat editing a new video, Jacob got a message on Instagram. It was from a young woman named Clarissa who had recently dropped out of college and was struggling with depression. She wrote, "I was going to give up, but I watched your video where you said, 'You don't have to be perfect to begin, you just have to begin.' And I cried for 20 minutes. And then I got up, made some tea, and started planning my next step. Thank you." Jacob stared at that message for a long time. That single line, inspired by Denzel, had now helped someone else. It was like a ripple across a pond, the impact spreading farther than he ever imagined. 3 years passed. Jacob had spoken in over 80 schools, collaborated with educational leaders, and even delivered a speech at a regional TEDx event. His YouTube channel passed 200,000 subscribers, and he was finally able to buy his own home, a modest but cozy 2-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood. More than the material success, he was proud of the man he was becoming. A man his mother would be proud of. A man who didn't let circumstance define him. Then, one evening, while checking his email, he noticed a message with a blue checkmark next to the name. It was from Denzel Washington's team. They had seen one of Jacob's YouTube videos, the one titled, "He Changed My Life," and he doesn't even know it. In it, Jacob shared his full journey and how that graduation speech had been the catalyst. The message read, "Mr. Washington watched your video and was deeply moved. He asked if you'd be willing to join him at an upcoming leadership conference as a guest speaker." Jacob's heart thudded so hard he thought it might burst. He reread the email at least 5 times to make sure it wasn't a prank. It wasn't. A week later, he found himself on a flight to Los Angeles, preparing to meet the very man whose voice had once pulled him off a couch and into his destiny. When he met Denzel, the actor greeted him with a handshake and said, "Jacob, you've taken the message and made it your own. That's what it's all about." They stood backstage before the event, and Denzel leaned